Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and so delighted that you're here today and joining us for another edition of Building Conversations. We've got a special guest today, but before I progress, let me start first with a land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. And while we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this land home. So thank you. So moving along. A little bit about Passive House Canada before we get to our guest today. Passive House Canada, we're a membership-based social enterprise. We're an advocacy organization. We are really involved with education and professional development. We provide technical services to our members and others. And we have members, staff, and instructors all across Canada. Next, please. Our mission, really three key areas: to make zero emission buildings known and adopted by government, industry, and the public, to support government and industry in the transition to high performance buildings. And we do this through education, certification, and policy development, and to promote the Passive House Institute building standard, globally recognized as the best building standard for high performance buildings. Next. A little bit about Passive House and our certifications. There's a number of certifications that you can take your buildings to. Most of us focus on Passive House Classic, but we also offer Plus and Premium, and this deck will be available if you want to delve into this a little bit more. I also encourage people who are unable to get their building to Passive House Classic to look at Passive House's low energy building. It is still a fantastic building, way better than code. And if you for whatever reason can't get to Classic, consider the low energy building. And of course, Passive House Canada also has the EnerFit standard, which is the certified retrofit program that is recognized as one of the best ways, the best low energy ways of retrofitting your building too. Next slide. Our guest today is Casey Gray. Casey's the founder of the sustainable building company, The Conscious Builder. He's host of the Conscious Builder podcast, the Conscious Builder show on YouTube. He's written about 400 blog posts on a wide variety of topics, and he brings almost 2 decades of experience to the construction industry and over a decade of experience to running and owning, growing multiple businesses while staying committed to his wife and son. Casey is on a mission to help people build homes, businesses, and lives in a more conscious manner. We'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Really looking forward to this conversation. Next slide.
Thanks for having me.
Good. And I love that. I love the sign behind you. And quite frankly, it's really a great backdrop. I've got this wood in my background. So really love that natural background. Let's start off at the very beginning. Tell us about yourself. Tell us how you came to be a building. What drew you to that profession?
Well, ultimately, it was because it was construction was my best course in high school. We were kind of talking about trades in school before we hit record and everyone came on. But I went through high school thinking I was going to be an engineer because I wanted to build stuff. So I was going through what I needed to go to university for that. And then they started pushing apprenticeships
Yeah.
towards, when I was in grade 11, I was the first year to not have OAC as well. So they were pushing everything into, what's supposed to be 5 years into 4 years. So everything was kind of a mess, but we were all just flowing with it. Didn't really matter. But then when they started pushing trades, I said, well, that's interesting to me. And I talked to my mom about it. And obviously that's kind of the direction I went. It was the only course that I think I had 98% in it or something like that. So it just made sense in my mind. I could start working right away and start making money as opposed to take on the big school debt. And I enjoyed it, right? I'm not a fan of sitting in a classroom. I'd rather just go out and learn hands-on and just do the work.
And do the work, yeah. And as you said, we were talking about trades training before we pushed the record button, and it's really good to hear that how you got to be here and how it was a high school program. I lament that many school boards are pulling back on trades training, and we need to expose as many young people as possible to the opportunities exist. So you entered the world of building, and how did you get to where you are today?
Through lots of it wasn't a direct path anyways.
No,
Ultimately,
never is.
when I got into trades, I turned down a couple projects. I knew I wanted to get into the apprenticeship. Ended up working for a small company that did custom homes, major renovations, additions. And I worked for them for just under 7 years. And eventually I was always doing stuff on the side. And then eventually I went on my own. And since then made a lot of mistakes and when it comes to business, right? So there's been a lot of growing pains, and it's evolved into what it is today with the Conscious Builder. And that all came from my son actually, and some personal development that my wife and I dove into. And we started asking ourselves, we became more conscious, more aware of what we were doing and why we were doing it. We started asking ourselves a lot of questions. And one of them was, why am I doing what I'm doing? And how can I make it better? My son, I started thinking about my son, and I said, if I'm going to tell him he can be and do whatever he wants, I have to do the same. So that's when everything started to change and the Conscious Builder started to come into focus.
Right. Well, tell me the premise of the Conscious Builder. What's the foundation of it?
Well, ultimately, like I said, like consciousness is a state of awareness, and I don't believe that there's one size fits all. We don't have to just build it one certain way, and nor can people necessarily afford to do it. It's expensive. For example, what we do, it's expensive to build a custom home, let alone a custom net zero home or passive home or whatever it may be. Does passive or net zero or whatever that building standard is it have to be more expensive than a custom home? No, there's a lot of factors that come into play, right? And the way I see it is that we're here to ask those questions, to bring up the consciousness of our clients so that they can make decisions that work for them. We're not here to judge on whatever those decisions are. We're just here to give them the information so they have everything laid out in front of them so that they can make a decision and continue to move forward with whatever their project is. So
it sounds like you're really working hard to demystify building to a higher level of performance, to lower operational energy or carbon, and really keeping the ball rolling in that way, that you provide people with the information they need. And if they don't know what their options are you providing them with what those options are? So if they want to just do a traditional code building, you're there to say, or are you there to show them there are different pathways?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had people reach out to us. Now, based on where we're at, if somebody comes to us and they just want to build a code built home, we just say, we're not the contractor for you. There's lots of guys out there that do that and want to do that. That's just not the projects that we're interested in. We're in that we're able to do that. But we also say, if you want to improve the standard, if you want to go beyond the minimum building code, then we'll help you. It doesn't have to be the extreme. We will help you with that.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Right.
And like I said, it's not one answer, one size fits all.
Right. So it's raising consciousness, and it's really helping people to build better, to build a house that is better. What are some of the major hurdles you face? Do you have difficulty getting people to build better, or the people you're working with are generally wanting to do something a little better anyway?
Yeah, for the most part, the people who are reaching out to us want to do something better. And so that's not necessarily a hurdle. There's a lot of people out there that aren't even aware of it, right? And that's usually the first step. And that's why we do so much content online, is we just want to get more and more information out there, like what you're doing here, so that people become more aware. But for the most part, we come to, we'll do presentations here. A lot of the people listening are for the most part converted, right? They believe in it, or they see that it is better. So that's why they're here. So we're preaching to the converted for a lot of what we do, but that's why we just put out more and more and more, and we try to reach more people. And that's why we've also shifted some of our focus to contractors to help them grow businesses, but all because I've made a lot of mistakes in business, like I mentioned, but also build better with regards to homes, because it's not just the carpenters or the contractor who needs to understand it. It's all of the trades that need to understand it, right? Everybody needs to be on the same page when you're building houses to a standard like passive.
To a much higher standard. Yeah. What are some of the common questions you get? I know what I get from folks who know me is they completely buy into the passive house concept, and it sounds wonderful, but it's when the rubber hits the road. What does that actually mean is what they say when they say, yes, we want a passive house, but they don't know what that really means. They know the standard or whatever, but what does it mean? Do you face that kind of thing, that people want to do better and your job is to teach them about what better means?
Yeah, I guess the most common question is, how much does it cost? That's the question that I get as the GC, and that question is impossible to answer until we have something to actually price, right? So it's always a chicken and egg game. It's well, how much does it cost to buy a car? Well, it depends. What kind of car do you want? What kind of features do you want? It's the same thing, except there's way more options when it comes to homes. So there's a lot of people who come to us who like the idea of passive house, but usually when we get into it, they start to realize how expensive just building in general is. So we might scale back, but we still provide, or we still put in a lot of those passive house concepts. So maybe we just don't go to the extreme insulation levels that we need, but we're always aiming to make the building as airtight as possible. We're still aiming for fossil fuel free homes. That's always what I'm working, and even before we started going the conscious builder, like in 11 to almost 12 years of business now, I think we built 2 houses with natural gas. Obviously there's been lots of renovations, but we've been doing fossil fuel free homes for that long now.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. What do people like most about the house that you build for them?
Well, once they experience it, it's the stuff that you can't show in pictures, right? It's the feeling that you get when you're in the home. It's how fresh the air is all the time. It's how quiet the home is, obviously when you have the windows closed. But it's all of those things that give you that feeling, that comfort, whether that's sound, whether that's the actual temperature, or whether that's the indoor air quality. It's those things that people really appreciate the most. And you have to live in a home to actually experience that, to understand what we're talking about, because you can't show that in a picture. You can't just tell somebody what it's like you can, that's what we're doing now, but you don't really grasp it or understand it until you're in a home like that.
Yeah. And our job here at Passive House Canada is to encourage the adoption of the Passive House standard by as many builders as possible. But we certainly encourage everyone to aim higher and do better, and not to build to code. And this is what you're doing. And I often tell people that they have to experience a passive house. Like once they walk in, I love to see the look on their face. They walk into the house, you shut the door, and they immediately talk about how quiet it is. There's no noise. And then later on, they can experience the fresh air and all the other benefits. But, do you find that people notice not having natural gas for heating? Are there issues with that for them?
I've never heard any complaints about that. The only houses we did with natural gas, the reason behind it was because they wanted radiant heating.
Okay. Yeah.
was the only thing we couldn't do. Like geothermal is possible, but it adds a lot of added expense to the construction cost, right? So it
Yeah.
just wasn't in the budget. Plus, that can't take care of air conditioning. You still need to run ductwork. So there's these added costs. So they said, well, if I'm going to already have to go the air conditioning route or do something for that, I can't afford geothermal. So we're going to go with the natural gas boiler.
Okay.
Luckily, that is a more efficient way to heat. So that's still better. It is still using natural gas.
Yeah. So what do we do? Those of us who are interested or who are conscious builders or conscious consumers will say, what do we do to move the industry ahead, to have more industry members think the way that you and your wife are and acting the way you are? What any suggestions for how we might do that?
What do we do as an industry, or what do we do as individuals?
Well, both, really. I mean, because individuals make up the industry. So I'll start with individuals and let's work our way up.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we can do is always tell people you vote with your wallet. Just think of when you go into a grocery store, whatever you buy more of, the store will bring more of into the store because they track that. They know what you're buying, right? Just like the internet, whatever you look up more of, you will get more of. Nowadays, whatever you talk about, you'll see ads on your phone, right? So those are the things is you actually have to start putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And you have to, and it doesn't have to be big. It can just be small commitments. It could just be, if you haven't changed your bulbs to LED, you're probably behind, but just those things, right? Start to create a little bit of momentum because all these little things that you do creates that momentum and you start to feel better and better about the decisions that you're making, whatever it may be. But that's ultimately what it comes down to is making decisions and doing things that are in line with what you believe in and in line with your values.
Right. And one of the questions that folks are asking is, how do you get your business to a point where it's recognized for the work it's doing, for the fact that it is a conscious business, aware and articulate about the environmental issues we face? How did you get your company to the point where people sought you out?
Well, we just committed and started working on those types of buildings. So we kind of launched it with our first house, the one that we built for ourselves, not the house I'm in right now, but when we built our own passive home that we sold a few years ago. And from there, that was kind of the hands-on learning experience that I was talking about. I don't love sitting in the classroom, just went out and did it. And we got it done. And that was the kickoff to the career. But it's been 8 years since we started that process and we just stayed committed to it. It's nothing that happens overnight. You just need to start taking on the projects that are interesting. You need to go out and find those projects. You need to say yes, and you need to continue moving forward. Right. And that's all it is. It does none of this stuff, all these overnight successes that we hear, but they're never overnight successes. No. They're always like overnight successes, 10, 15, 20 years in the making.
Yeah, right. 20 years of overnight work to get to be an overnight success. So for you, it's been word of mouth, but it's also been social media as well, helping to spread the word.
Yeah, YouTube has helped with that. We've gotten some projects through that, and then we built good relationships with a few designers and architects around the city too here in Ottawa. And we actually built houses. So the passive houses that we have been involved with have been my own, as well as 4 other architects in the city.
And so you start when people talk about how to build, in our case, to passive house, and we always tell them start with the architect, start with the building designers, right? You can't take a pre-designed building and turn it into a high performance building. That's way too expensive. But if you're starting from scratch, make sure you're working with an architect and designer that knows passive house, so you're starting from that high performance building concept right from the get-go.
Yeah, and you definitely want to make sure though you have a contractor that's committed to it, even if they don't know everything yet, but they need to be working. I'm a big advocate for the integrated design process, which I think we've talked about in the past as well, is you need to have everybody involved, because even today, like I still get plans that are designed beyond the budget, right? And what often happens is that the homeowner will go to the architect, and sometimes they have a budget, sometimes they don't. The design gets done, then they come to us and we say, well, this is what it's going to cost, or this is probably, I always start with just a preliminary range because there's a lot of work to put a price together. And it's usually, I've never had a project that was like, oh, well, we got lots more money. Let's make the house.
Yeah, let's do more. Let's go
Yeah.
further.
It's
So
always, what are you going to scale back on? And
right.
that's a way harder decision to make than, what do we
Yeah.
add?
So explain to folks in the audience who may not know about integrated design process what it means to you to follow that process.
To me, that's just making sure everybody that is involved with the project is involved right from the get-go. So from the beginning, it would be the energy advisor, the architect or designer. There could be a different designer for interior stuff as well, the homeowner, and the general contractor.
Right.
And then from there, the general contractor brings in trades as required. So the benefit to having your general contractor right from the beginning and committing to them is that they can then go to their trades and say, "Hey, we do have this project. The clients have committed to us. We need some input from you," and their trades will be happy to do that. But if there's no commitment yet, the general contractor, it's hard to go to trades and say, "Hey, can you give me some rough numbers or do a little bit of work for this project that I may or may not get?"
Right.
Right. So
Right.
everybody's just slammed right now. The industry's changing. We can't even, like, even now we're talking about how hiring people is changing. Like, we have to uh, pay more to get the good guys. We had a certain hiring process. We need to speed things up, or else, because we're losing people
Right.
that are interested in hiring. Right. So the whole industry is changing on all fronts.
Right. Right.
So
Do you? Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. I cut you
so
off.
commitment's that much more important. You need to make decisions, and you need to stick to them, and you just need to keep moving forward. The more you waver, the longer it's going to take, and the more.
Yeah. Right. And you've got the client who right up front knows what they're going to get at the end of the day. There's fewer change orders as the project goes along. The builder or the client is there saying yes or no, and they're involved in understanding the trade-offs with everybody around the table. I certainly know I know architects, engineers, GCs who were unsure about the integrated design process when it was first presented to them, but wouldn't do it any other way now. And it sounds like that's your methodology as well. So you talked a little bit about trades. I got on my soapbox and talked about the need to introduce young folks to trades at an earlier age and some of the issues there. But I wanted to, we talk about, we hear a lot about innovation in building and building process. And I know this probably isn't an area that you're involved with, but maybe you've given some thought to it. One growing area is off-site building. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, that may not be for custom home. I'm not sure if it's in your bailiwick. Is it a threat? Is it a benefit? Any thoughts on that?
I think it has its place for sure. I think, to your point, it's hard for custom homes. I've yet to create a financial case where it made sense. The few times that we did look into prefab, when we dug deeper into what we were actually getting and the work that we still had to do on site, it didn't make financial sense, because usually when people are thinking prefab, they're thinking that they can save money. It's
Right.
not because of anything else, right? The only other time it might make sense is if you're ripping a building off, or a roof off of a building, and you need to put up the walls and the new roof really quickly. The extra cost would likely make sense in that point because of the saved time,
Mhm.
having to wrap up the building. But that's a whole different story. So we've also done a research project within our CAN where we did a prefabricated exterior energy retrofit. We built panels kind of like if we did them ourselves, but the idea was to model a factory built panel and show up and do an exterior retrofit. So right over top of the old masonry or siding or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
That can all be found online. It was pretty interesting. So I think if you're doing the same thing over and over again, prefabrication, I think makes a lot of sense. You can control the environment. You can do things quicker. The more you do things, it's the whole factory line mindset, right? If you can do the same thing over and over again, it will be faster. I'm
Right.
also excited to see what's going to happen with 3D printing, because there's been 3D printing in homes happening for years now, but it's been more for 3D printing homes in where there was a severe storm. So if you show up, you can print a few homes in a day so people have shelter, as opposed to building, passive homes. Right?
Right.
A lot of things that have to go into the wall. So, but I am excited. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool things with regards to innovation technology in the coming years.
And we're being forced into it as you pointed out, we have constraints around the number of people, the number of tradespeople we need to access, and costs continue to go up for our building products. It may be one neat area for innovation. So, as you're moving ahead with these, with the zero emission buildings or high performance buildings, what are some of the things that municipal officials could do from your perspective to speed the adoption or to speed this process along? Because every municipality, we all have, many have declared climate emergencies. Many of them have set targets for GHG emission reductions through buildings. But what could we be doing? What could they be doing actually to help your industry? And what could we be talking to Passive House Canada? What should we be saying to municipal officials when we talk to them to make your life easier and make the adoption of these buildings faster?
Well, from my experience, the issues that we run into is really at the permitting stage. We're typically not involved with that because we're not doing the design. We're building it.
Right.
So we get delayed because they're seeing stuff that's not the norm, right? And there's so many new employees that they don't even understand. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from the designers and architects that we're working with is that they've been doing applications a certain way for years, and now they're getting pushback because there's somebody new there. There's somebody younger there who doesn't understand, who's obviously afraid to make a mistake, right? Yeah. So they're not sure what they can accept and what they can't accept and so forth. And the other side is that we get different responses or different requests from different building officials on site. What was allowed on one project isn't allowed on the next project because it's in somewhere different in the city and it's a different inspector. And that inspector just doesn't agree with it or interprets the building code differently or whatever it may be. So there's a lack of communication. We're getting different messages from different people and we're just doing the same thing. And that makes it hard for us to price things or to give a heads up to the client because then what'll happen is if something comes up and so we have to do this now, the clients will be like, well, why didn't you know that you had to do that?
Yeah. Because the next town over, we didn't have to do it and now we do. So this is something we have heard and we are ramping up our efforts to talk to building officials through their associations to educate them, to bring them on stream so that when folks like you are out proposing really great buildings, you're not having to educate or argue with. I mean, and it's not even differences between jurisdictions. We also hear that within the same city, two different building inspectors can have two different interpretations of a particular issue, which would make me pull my hair out, quite frankly, if I were the builder or the designer. And I can see how frustrating that could be. So we'll keep pushing that message, and bear with us. It may take a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't know what they do for training. I haven't looked into it, but if they were all getting the same training or they're understanding building science a little bit more, then maybe that would help too, because I understand their point of view. A lot of them are just afraid that they're going to sign off on something and then something will happen down the road
they're ultimately, and I think we all need to remember that they're ultimately their signatures on the sign off and they are responsible. So I'll cut them some slack. We have worked with the Building Officials Association in BC to run workshops and educate about the BC Step Code and Passive House, where it fits in, to try and standardize right across the province how building officials operate. Clearly, we need to do more of that right across the country, but we'll get on it. You talked a little bit about earlier on, you talked a little bit about the talking to customers about cost. How do you generally address what I would, the green premium? Does it, what we're hearing from designers and architects and GCs is to build to the Passive House Classic standard is anywhere from 5 to 10% premium. There are places in North America where it's at par because they've been doing it longer. So they have the supply chain, they have trades, and everyone trained up. So it's on par. So how do you address this green premium issue with people? They want the best, and then they come and they sit down with you and you tell them the best is going to cost a little more. But how do you convince them to stay with the best?
So the tricky thing is that it's not just about going to passive. This is what I tell people. So if you want to go to Passive House or whatever it may be, where you're going to spend extra money is on your envelope. So it's going to be your air sealing details, extra insulation, maybe some extra framing because you have a thicker wall. And then you're going to potentially spend more on windows and doors. Not necessarily. We've done homes that weren't passive that they spent a fortune on windows and doors just because they wanted a certain style of window and door, and they didn't actually perform very good compared to a much cheaper version, right? So there's so many factors. So I always find it interesting when people say, well, it's going to be 5 to 10% more, but compared to what, right? The only way to really figure that out is if you take one design and then you change it to Passive House, and then you figure out what it's going to be. For what we've done, everything we do is passive. Custom. We've never built the same house twice. So I can't tell you if it's going to be 10% or 20% more, or none, right? Because it depends on the design. I can tell you that the more bump outs you have, the steeper the roof is, the bigger, like there's certain things that make it difficult to seal up and to hit passive. So if you start with a box, the more things you add on to that box, the more expensive it's going to be, the more difficult it will be to passive.
And this goes right back to what you said earlier on. Find an architect who knows the high performance building. And they'll make sure that if you want a lot of those extra frills, that they're somehow attached outside the box, or they can design you a beautiful looking building that is high performance without all of the frills. So I know talking to architects and others when people don't want to pay extra, or maybe they, their desire for better runs up against their bank account. I've had people say, architects say to their clients, listen, you want to put $100,000 kitchen in, but let me tell you, let's put the best IKEA kitchen in that money can buy, because in 10 years, we know you're going to be tearing that kitchen out. But when you finally put your $100,000 kitchen in, it'll be inside a Passive House. But if you don't build Passive House at the very beginning, and it's, I've had that same argument. People talk about, stairways and hardwood flooring. Hold off on things like that. You can add those in 5-10 years down the road anyway. So that's one argument, I suppose, to get around it.
Yeah, because you don't want to. I always say, like, I will never want to change the windows in the houses that we build, because we'll never be able to seal them up properly after the fact or get them in and out. So that's exactly it. Everything you can see is all the makeup, right? That's all stuff that can be changed. Do I recommend, ripping it out? No, if it's good, right? If we can avoid it. But if you can build something better, exactly as you described it, you can change all the pretty makeup later. You can, you can use it somewhere else in your house potentially, right? Take that IKEA kitchen out that you put in 10 years ago and put it in your garage or your shop.
Yeah. Put it in your cottage, whatever, do something with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. That how that's working. So you work in the Ottawa area. We hear from everybody in our organization about where the marketplace is going in terms of housing affordability, and the impact of increased prices to build houses, whether it be lumber, windows, doors. How's that affecting your marketplace?
Yeah, it's the same. We've had a couple of projects go on hold because
Yeah.
they just, now it's pushed it beyond there. But it was a tight budget to begin with, like it always is with people. And then you add on the extra cost and it increased the budget even more. Now what's coming is that we're realizing what we have to pay for labor too. So labor rates have to go up too. So everything's going to go up. If there's a shortage, it's a demand thing, right? It's supply demand. So
Hmm.
until supply catches up with demand, I can't see prices coming down.
Right.
And hopefully soon, hopefully by sometime next year, we have some projects that were already underway. We got ahead of it. We ordered a bunch of material that we could. But now we've also ordered materials that we're still waiting for. And it's been over 3 months, like for siding.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yikes. Well, I hear in the States, I've been reading in the States over the last few days that lumber prices are tumbling. I hope you're seeing that happening here in Canada. We're always a little behind, and I don't think they'll go down to where they were, a year and a half ago. We can hope because the last thing we need is to build better is simply an increase in products. So, what other areas? What advice, do you have? We talked a bit about how you've become known in your marketplace for building better, being one of the better builders, being the conscious builder. And you talked early on about having made mistakes, and I know as a business person I've made them all. I think I've made them all the mistakes at least once. So I'm always willing to share. What would you do differently if you knew then what you now know? Can you give us an example or even two?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we started the Conscious Builder Academy for, right? So if there are
Great.
contractors or anything on it, they can head to consciousbuilderacademy.com. We launched our first course.
Okay.
The first thing was coming down to money, right? I didn't understand how the dollars and cents worked in a business
Okay.
and overhead and all of that, right? It has nothing to do with passive house, but it just has to do at the end of the day, if you're not able to stay in business, you're not going to be able to build passive houses, right? So
Right.
you make sure that your first, comfortable making money, because a lot of people are like, well, maybe I'm charging too much, and so they lower the price, and they also start to compete with the guys that are working out of the back of their truck that aren't plan on staying long term, right? If
Right.
you want
Right.
to serve the industry, you need to charge a fair price, but what you're worth, so that you can now provide for your family, provide for your employees, provide better service, warranty the work. There's always going to be something that needs to come up, right? So that in 5 years from now, if that client needs something, you can go back and serve them, right? So you need to make sure that you understand the numbers first of all, and really, really feel comfortable with those numbers.
Right.
And it's not as fun, right? Most people who get into business are in it, especially as contractors, because you like swinging the hammer, or you like doing the physical work. So doing the office stuff is a little bit more difficult, but it's extremely important. Find somebody who likes to do it, bring on a partner, whatever it may be. So that would be the first thing. The other thing would be I focus on team. Is making sure that right from the get-go, is I understand the culture that I want to create, and I bring on people that have values that are aligned.
Hmm.
And that would be number two thing to make sure, because I had internal issues. We deal with enough problems to begin with, right? To have internal problems too, what's the point?
Who needs that mess? Exactly. Okay, so make sure you cultivate the right group around you, the right group of people on the team, and make sure you understand, I guess, the fundamentals really of running a business, the finances, etc., of how you run a business.
Yeah,
So
I also did something like I did a quick online course of 5 things I wish I knew before I started my business. So that's at Conscious Academy too. That one's free.
right. and run your URL through us again, past us again, would you? It's the
Yeah.
conscious.
It's just consciousbuilderacademy.com.
.com. Okay, shameless plug for what you're up to. We're going to put a shameless plug later on for Passive House Canada and some of the training we do. Maybe there's an overlap someday that we can share content and build consciousness with folks, and good building practice as well. So looking forward to that. We've got a bunch of questions that have been piling up here, and I've touched on a couple of them, and it's really nice to see folks are so interested in what it is you're doing. Deb, are you managing the questions, or Sarah, are you managing the questions for us?
Yeah, it's Deb here. Yep, I can go ahead with a few questions here.
Yeah, why don't we take a couple of questions and see where it leads us?
Sure. Yeah, actually, some of them are getting answered as they're put out, which is great.
Oh, okay.
But let's just back up here a little bit. And Casey, you touched on this a bit, but another question was, what are the biggest lessons learned during your build outs?
During the what? Sorry?
During the build out.
The build out of the business, the task force?
Well, I'll tell you, Harvey, how would you like to join in here and explain yourself a little better?
Well, that's hard for me to explain myself. I know there's some people here who know me well enough to dispute it. Chris is one of them. Casey, I do follow you, and I love the stuff you've been doing. My question really, I have a couple of questions, and maybe it'll dovetail onto it, is what's the biggest lessons learned as you're going from concept to completion? And then to add on to that, how hard has it been with your trades to get them on site to build Passive House? And what are the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome? Thank you. Great show so far.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thanks for following us, Harvey. Appreciate that. Those are the little things, knowing that there's people out there that are interested in it keeps us going, right? So really appreciate that. I think nowadays the world has changed recently. So the biggest thing that we're dealing with right now is making sure that we have decisions ahead of time so that we can get ahead of the curve, right? We can't use certain materials on some projects because we can't get the product quick enough anymore, right? So we're dealing with delays. So unless a client wants to delay a project for an extended period of time, and then we might not have work because everything's getting delayed. That'd be number one. So now we've created processes that we're like, we need all of these decisions before we start. We can't make decisions on the fly anymore. That's the number one thing that we have to change now. So when you're starting with the concept to finish, is we need to have everything sorted out up front. Like choose your toilets, choose your faucets. Like we need all of those things too, because we'll just get it on site. If we have room, we'll get it to site. If not, we'll figure it out. We'll get it ordered. We'll plug them to just store it in their warehouse as long as they possibly can, and then we'll take it, right? So that would be the number one thing that I recommend people do now. Because like I said, we're waiting for 3-4 months for siding, and people are getting upset with us, right? And we can't do anything about it. Sorry, I forget the second part to your question.
Getting your trades on side, and what's been the biggest hurdle?
Yeah, we didn't really have I have a long-standing relationship with a lot of the trades, the big trades. Usually what happens is that we get a little pushback and they don't get it. And so you kind of make some jokes with them. I always remember my wife has her master's in clinical psychology. And when she was going through her school, I'm like, I won't need to know that stuff. Who cares? That's all I do now, right? Is just understand people and work with people. And especially as a contractor, you need to basically be able to go on site and meet people where they're at sometimes. If they're angry, sure, be angry back at them. If they're be more passive, right? So you need to be able to kind of shift your mood. But the biggest thing with trades are usually rough around the edges, right? So I can work with them on site. You make some jokes. You tell them like, look, you just explain why. This is why. This is what we have to do. But what happens after they've done it once, they're proud of it. Then they can say, I was a part of that build. I did that build. Like we're doing a 160-year-old home right now. Other trades are coming and be like, oh yeah, my friend was here and he was working on the project. I've been friends with him for years. And like they're talking about it, right? So it's that little momentum that speeds up. So once they've done it once, everyone made fun of me for wearing Birkenstocks when I built my passive house 8 years ago.
With or without socks is the question.
Yeah, I've never even owned Birkenstocks. That's the funny thing, right? So but now everyone's proud to be part of it, to be a part of that project, right? And I think that's where the culture, and then they start to realize it's for more than just a paycheck, right? It's not just trying to get in and out quickly. It's to actually do a project and be proud of it. That's a whole different thing. That's something that you just, once again, you have to experience.
Right. There was a third question, Harvey, I think you had, or maybe it's been answered.
I probably had a couple more. You know what? I think I know Daniel Clark has a whole bunch, and if I find mine again, I'll just raise my hand and you can come back to
Okay.
me. Sorry, Chris, I just can't remember what the third one
No,
was.
that's quite all right. I wanted to comment on what Casey was talking about in terms of trades. I know we do a lot of trades training, and I like to talk to people about why are you here, why are you taking the trades training, and it's wonderful to see the tradespeople wanting to build better, wanting to have pride in what they're doing, and I have a number of architects and designers who tell me that when they go to do their first air tightness test, that everyone is given the day off or whatever, but suddenly a lot of tradespeople show up because they want to see how their work stacks up. And they're quite excited to see it. And it's almost a celebration of excellence, when the building performs well. Or if it doesn't perform as well, they're the first ones to try and figure out why it's not performing well. So I don't think we give enough credit to our tradespeople who are, dedicated to excellence, like the rest of us. So there's my pitch. So another question, Deb.
Yeah, question here from Daniel. How much of a challenge are the planning departments out east to satisfy and still do efficient design?
Like I said, I don't typically deal with the permitting process, but from what I've heard from the architects and designers we're working with, like Ottawa is notoriously difficult. I know I can compare it to the project that we just did on Algonquin Highlands. We got our permit in less than 24 hours. The inspectors that come on site, he gets it. Like he'll come on site when I'm doing the work, and he notices the attention to detail, and he's like, well, if you did that right, I know you're going to do everything else right. Like he's like, the fact that you sealed the ceiling way up there and taped everything and did it properly, he's like, I know you're going to get all the stuff down here. Right. So there's some common sense involved with it, which was interesting. And it was more like you were working with them as opposed to against them. So a lot of times here is, like I said, everyone's just trying to protect themselves, and everyone's worried about getting in trouble. Right. And they forget that we're all working towards a common purpose.
Yeah. And that's a really important lesson to take away. Another question, Deb.
Got a few questions here in regards to the clinical psychology, as your wife being a clinical psychologist, and some really good, intriguing questions regarding team dynamics, organizational culture, and how important that is. Did you want to touch base a little bit more on maybe some strategies that you have used in this area of your team?
Yeah, so we actually have a really strict hiring process now. So before we bring anybody on, we do what's called the rule of three. We interview at least 3 people for every position, whatever it is. We interview them in 3 different locations. They get interviewed by 3 different people, and we check at least 3 references. And if it's not a yes or hell yes for all 3 people who's interviewed them, then we don't hire them. But like I said, things have changed. We need to speed it up a little bit. So what we've decided to do recently is we're actually going to reduce that to 2 interviews. We'll get it done within a day or 2. And then I'm always the 3rd one. So what I would do is, because we always have a probational period anyways, I can go out during that probational period, talk to the guys, see how things are going, talk to them, and make sure that everything's working. Because what happens, we need to be very protective of our culture inside. Because like I said, we're dealing with a lot of problems. So if our team isn't meshing, then the other problems are just going to get worse. So we need to make sure that our team is working well together, because it's never going to be perfect, right? Especially now we're dealing with delays and problems left, right, and center with stuff that's out of our control. And I'm constantly reminding people, like, we're getting on calls sometimes and we're arguing as a team, not because we're upset with each other, because we're just frustrated at what's happening, right? And it's starting to come out. And I need to remind people that, look, we're all on the same team. We're supporting each other. We'll get through this. This is what we're doing. What can we do right now to move forward? As long as you have people working together, then you can get through anything.
Great. Thank you. Harvey, you had another question here that queued up, you said?
Yeah, that was the other question. Was my shameless plug. I'm sure that Chris will like it, and that is, what courses have you taken from Passive House, and what courses have you taken from Passive House Canada?
So I actually haven't done any courses because I'm the hands-on guy. That being said, I have been talking with them, and we were talking about which course. I don't know which course that I was going to actually do, but
I think it's the trades course, the passive trades course. Yeah.
So I haven't gone through the details. Yeah, because I'm the hands-on. Like, we're just so busy. I'm definitely out there to just make things happen. I'm not one that also says that I know everything. I don't know how to do the calculations. I don't know how to figure out like the orientation in terms of what, if I add this overhang, how is it going to do? Like that's part of the integrated design process. I'm the builder. We're good at building. That's what we do. We can seal up the building. We know what details, we know what works, we know what doesn't work. We've tried a bunch of different features, but I'm going to lean on the designer for some of this stuff. And I'm going to lean on the energy advisor for other things too. Right. And we all need to, I'm very much like, let's stay on our lane. I can veer out a little bit. I understand it all and I grasp it all, but I don't need to know how to do the calculations. I don't need to sit in front of my computer to do it. I don't need to know how to do a blower door test, although I just did one for the first time yesterday because the guy, Brian, who does all of our videos and all of our content, he used to work for HomeSaw, who does all of our energy advising. So we borrowed a blower door test to do it, right? Just to speed things up. But
hopefully found doing a blower door test in a single family residence was not too difficult, like a lot of passive house things. And I'm delighted that you're taking. I think we've got you booked in September for our trades course. So I'm going to be interested to see your take on high performance building, on passive house building. When you've been through a few days with fellow builders, tradespeople, and some really great instructors who come from the same background that you come from.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That's what I needed. I just needed this push to get it done because I've done training for other things to get our certifications for net zero and all of those things, right? But I've never had to do anything on the passive house side.
Well, this is it. And we'll, in our discussions over the past several months, it was clear to me that you more than understood the fundamentals of building to net zero passive house. We're, again, our big job here at Passive House Canada is to convert as many people as possible to net zero buildings and to lay out one pathway forward, which is through Passive House Canada. Happy to do the training to get people there, but you are more than well on your way. You're actually doing it. So all good to hear. Deb, what else do you have for us?
Another question here, a way to find building inspectors who know at least a bit about passive buildings, or is it just luck of the draw for who does the inspection?
I think to some extent it's luck of the draw. However, what I've recently found out is that we can request a different inspector if, for example, one inspector is giving us a hard time for something. So we usually, at least in our area, depending on where you're building, you get a certain inspector. So there has been some inspectors that are better than others, so we'll know what we're getting into. But then again, now there's a lot of younger people coming in, right? And people moving around to different departments. So it's always changing. I know that you can reach out wherever you're building. You should be able to reach out to whoever their supervisor is if you're having issues and deal with them directly. I also speak to my trades because they'll call, like our plumber will call for plumbing inspections all the time. So if we run into issues with plumbing, I call him and he'll deal with it, right? Because he's been doing it. He knows which inspectors work well for plumbing. So there's, once again, it's all part of the team, right? And just making some phone calls and seeing who can help who. And I usually just don't give up till I get the answer I'm looking for.
And I would imagine too that as your company gets to be known within a municipality by building inspectors, they get what you're doing. You mentioned the building inspector who pointed out the attention to detail. When you go back and do another project there, you already have established that credibility with them.
Yeah, one thing that I find really helps is if you reach out to the inspector before the project and you meet with them and say, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm doing it. Do you see any issues? now that we should address, because we obviously want to move. And then now, like I said, is more important than ever, because we can't afford any more delays than we're already getting. So
Right.
when you bring them involved right from the beginning, they usually respect that a lot more, because then they have input, right? They're not just showing up and you built whatever you wanted. Maybe they're showing up and you built it the way that they wanted to see it, because it made sense and they agreed to it ahead of time.
Yeah, good. We've got another question there, Deb. We're almost out of time.
Yes, we got time for a couple more questions here.
Okay.
One question here is, Casey, do you use double stud walls or SIPs in your buildings?
Yeah, we've done both. So out of the passive homes that we've built, we've done double stud wall. We've both two different options. So one with the load bearing being on the inside, one with the load bearing being on the outside. Actually two on the inside. We've also done a prefabricated stud, kind of like a double stud that was kind of hanging the second stud, but it was a prefabricated, like engineered wall truss. And then we've also done an ICF home that was certified passive. So we've kind of tested all the options. So the only one we haven't done is prefab.
Okay, great. Harvey's asking Larson trusses?
No, they were completely like engineered by, this was for, I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Rosen, if you've heard of his house. Anyways, he's the architect, right? So he put way more time into his own house than any homeowner could probably afford to pay him. So he had engineered all these trusses that were manufactured just for his house.
Great. I think we're probably out of time here, Chris and Casey.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Casey. Really appreciated you taking the time to be with us today and to taking some great questions and to talking to us about being not only a conscious consumer, but also a conscious builder. And, I would encourage folks to check out your website to learn more about what you're doing and lessons learned and maybe some of the things they can learn from you. Let's turn the slide. Let's go back to our slide deck then. And I've got a few more slides and we'll end the session. But let me end here by saying thank you, Casey. And we will definitely see you around. Well, especially once we're allowed to travel back to Ottawa. I'd love to have a coffee with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. Really
Good.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
and all
take
the
care. Thank you. So let's get to the slides. We'll finish off today's presentation. Thanks. I just want to, we have a number of programs, a number of educational opportunities coming up. We've got that great project called Lessons Learned from Passive House Projects, where we're highlighting events or buildings all across the country. And the next one we have coming up, our next stop is in Saskatchewan. And you can go online to passivehousecanada.com and register for it today. The start date for this one is June 25th of this month. Next slide. If you are a designer, an architect, a GC, I'd strongly encourage, and you're really interested in building high performance net zero buildings, our pathway to Passive House Designer Consultant Certification is something you should be interested in. That course, it's a very extensive course, 3 parts. It includes our energy modeling software, and preparation for the international designer consultant exam. So I'd encourage you to take that. I'll simply let people know that we have a 96% graduation rate. So if you want to become a certified designer consultant, working with us will increase your chances of getting there. Great course. Next slide. Our pattern language passive house course. How to design and build high-performance multi-unit buildings at the lowest possible cost. Great instructor giving this course, Monty Paulson. You may know from, one of the founders of the Passive House movement in Canada. Next slide. There we are. Really excited to say that in August, we're going to take July off, but in August, we're back, this time with Harold Orr. You may have joined us a few months ago for Harold's first show with us. Harold Orr was instrumental in building the Regina, or the Saskatchewan Conservation House in Regina. He is a Canadian pioneer in Passive House and has been recognized as such as by the Passive House Institute. So we're going to be talking about the Harold's post Saskatoon House work. I know he's currently working on some really neat insulation projects. We want to get caught up. So join us August the 11th for our conversation with Passive House pioneer and Order of Canada recipient, Harold Orr. Thank you very much, everyone. Don't miss our next one, our next show. Wanted to thank everyone again for being here today. Look forward to any questions you may have, any information you may want. Visit us at passivehousecanada.com. Sign up for our newsletter and stay in touch with what we're doing. Thank you all for being here today. Take care.